Okay, so you want to own a laundromat. Find a space, fill it with washing machines, unlock the front door, and watch the quarters roll in while you're sitting at home doing nothing. That is the dream people sell. And honestly, parts of it are real. The United States has somewhere between 29,000 and 35,000 laundromats, generating roughly $5 billion a year in gross revenue. The industry has a historical success rate of somewhere between 95 and 96%, which is extraordinary when you consider that most restaurants fail within the first 3 years. And the average cash return on investment sits between 20 and 35%, which beats a lot of things people put money into. So this is not a fantasy business. The numbers are real, but the space between the dream and the reality is where this story actually lives. Because a laundromat is not a passive investment. It is a utility infrastructure business that happens to look like a storefront. Every coin that drops into one of those machines sets off a chain of mechanical events that slowly, quietly, relentlessly cost you money. And if you do not understand that chain before you get in, you will feel it in very painful ways after. So let's start at the beginning. Before you own a single washing machine, before you sign a single lease, before you spend a single dollar, let's talk about where your laundromat is going to be, because that decision alone determines whether this business works or whether it doesn't. 87 to 90% of every laundromat's customers come from within 1 mile of the store. 1 mile, not 5 miles, not the whole city. 1 mile. That means if the people within a 1 mile radius of your chosen location don't need your service regularly, you do not have a business. You have an expensive room full of machines. The people who use laundromats most are renters. Specifically, renters who do not have washers and dryers in their apartments. The median household income of a typical laundromat customer is around $28,000 a year. These are people living in older apartment buildings, student housing, dense urban neighborhoods where the buildings were put up decades ago and never retrofitted with laundry hookups. Some landlords prohibit tenants from installing machines at all, because a poorly installed washer flooding the unit below is a landlord's nightmare. And then there are people who own their own machines, but have a king-sized comforter or a pile of blankets they cannot fit into a standard home washer. So the customer exists everywhere. The question is density. You are looking for neighborhoods where multifamily renter populations make up more than 50 to 60% of households within a 1 to 3 mile radius. You need a site with parking, because laundry is heavy and people do not walk with it if they don't have to. You need a building with serious utility infrastructure. Water mains big enough to supply dozens of machines simultaneously, natural gas lines for the dryers, electrical service that can handle the load. When those utility systems are already in place, your build-out costs go down significantly. When they are not, they go up in ways that will shock you. A mediocre laundromat in the right neighborhood will consistently outperform a beautiful laundromat in the wrong one. Every experienced operator in this business knows that. Location is not just important. It is the decision. Now let's talk about money and how much of it you need before your first customer ever walks through the door. There are 2 ways to get into this business. You buy an existing laundromat or you build one from scratch. Buying an existing store costs somewhere between $100,000 and $500,000 depending on the size, the location, the age of the equipment, and how much money the place is already making. The appeal is obvious. You walk in on day 1 with an existing customer base, a revenue history you can verify, and machines that are already running. The risk is also obvious. Those machines might be old. The lease terms might be terrible. The previous owner might have deferred maintenance for years. You are buying someone else's problems along with their customer list. Building from scratch or completely retooling a space that has never been a laundromat costs more and takes longer. Total development costs for a modern mid-sized facility somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 square feet with 30 to 50 washers and a matching number of dryers, typically run between $200,000 and $500,000. Large urban installations can hit $1.2 million. Here is where it starts to get real. Commercial front-load washers, the kind you need for a serious operation, cost between $3,000 and $7,000 each for standard 20 to 40 pound capacity machines. If you want the big ones, the 60 to 8 pound machines that can handle comforters and bulk loads, those run $10,000 to $15,000 each, sometimes more. So for a 30 machine washer floor, you are spending somewhere between $90,000 and $200,000 just on washers. Before you buy a single dryer, commercial dryers run $3,000 to $10,000 per unit. Stack dryers on the lower end, large single-pocket industrial dryers on the higher end. Then you need to actually hook all of this up. The plumbing alone for a commercial laundry is serious work. You need 3 to 4 inch drain mains, lint interceptors so you are not sending lint into the municipal sewer system and getting fined for it, backflow preventers, commercial water heating systems. That work costs between $5,000 and $20,000, depending on how much infrastructure the space already has. Electrical panels, step-down transformers, and the gas headers that feed the dryers add another $20,000 to $50,000. Total facility renovation costs for a gutted space can run from $50,000 to $200,000. And you are still not done. You need payment systems. The old coin-only model is disappearing fast, and we'll get to why in a moment. But if you are going modern, card readers, recharge kiosks, mobile app integration, that runs $400 per machine on the low end for basic card readers and up to $5,000 to $15,000 for centralized management kiosks. Security cameras with cloud backup, $2,000 to $10,000. Seating and folding tables, another few thousand. Change machines, if you still accept coins, anywhere from $1,300 to $10,000 each. Detergent vending machines, signage, insurance, legal fees to structure the business entity. By the time you open the front door for the first time, you have spent real money, hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is not a side hustle. This is a capital-intensive business that requires serious financial commitment before it earns a single dollar. Now let's talk about what it costs just to keep the lights on. Every day, every week, every month, before profit. Utilities are the largest single variable expense in a laundromat. They consume somewhere between 20 and 30% of total gross revenue, and in high-cost markets, California, New York, parts of New England, they can eat up to 35%. This is the number that catches people off guard the most. Water and sewer fees are the first and biggest hit. Commercial washers consume a serious amount of water per cycle, and many municipalities charge more for sewer discharge than they do for water delivery itself because processing the wastewater costs them money, and they pass that cost to the commercial users generating the most of it. A laundromat with dozens of machines running hundreds of cycles a day is exactly the kind of commercial user they are thinking about when they set those rates. Natural gas runs the water heaters and the dryers. And this is where the volatility begins, because natural gas prices fluctuate. When gas prices spike, which they did dramatically in the winters of 2021 and 2022, laundromat owners across the country watched their dryer operating costs jump without any ability to immediately respond, because changing your posted prices takes time and risks losing customers to a competitor who hasn't raised prices yet. Electricity runs the motors, the logic boards inside the machines, the lighting, the security systems, the HVAC, and the payment kiosks. That's a substantial draw, running constantly during operating hours. For a mid-sized store, the aggregate monthly utility bill typically runs between $3,000 and $6,000. In high-volume, high-rate markets, it can reach $8,500 a month. That is between $36,000 and $102,000 a year just in utilities. Before you pay rent, before you pay insurance, before you pay anyone who works there, before you spend a dollar on maintenance or repairs. Speaking of maintenance, every cycle your machines complete is slowly destroying them. That is not an exaggeration. It is the physics of the business. The main drum bearings in a front-load washer are under enormous stress during the high-speed spin cycle. Over thousands of cycles, those bearings wear down, the drum starts to wobble, and eventually the machine either tears itself apart or triggers error codes and shuts down. Drain valves get jammed by foreign objects, coins that customers forgot to take out of pockets, buttons that pop off shirts, small debris that ends up inside the drum. When a drain valve jams open, the machine leaks continuously, which you may not notice right away, but your water bill will. Dryer belts snap, igniter elements in gas dryers burn out. Lint accumulates in the exhaust ducts, which restricts airflow, which forces the burner to fire longer to achieve the same drying result, which raises your gas bill and accelerates wear on the heating elements. A standard front-load washer lasts 12 to 15 years in a commercial laundromat. A heavy-duty 60 to 80-pound machine might go 15 to 20 years with proper maintenance. But proper maintenance is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Routine monthly maintenance and emergency repairs average $500 to $1,500 per month for a mid-sized store. And smart operators set aside a capital reserve, typically 3 to 5% of monthly gross revenue, specifically to fund equipment replacement over time. Because here is the thing about equipment failure in a laundromat. It is not a one-time event. It is a constant. Something is always failing, something is always being repaired, something is always approaching the end of its useful life. The operators who survive long-term are the ones who treat machine wear as a scheduled operating expense, not an unexpected disaster. Now let's build the revenue model, because this is where things actually start to look interesting. The core of a laundromat's revenue is the vend price, what the customer pays per cycle. A standard top-load washer cycle might be priced at $2.50 to $3.50. A mid-size front loader running a 25-pound load might be $4 to $6. The large 60 to 80-pound machines that handle bulk loads can command $8 to $12 per cycle, sometimes more because the customers using them need the capacity and they know it. Dryer revenue historically tracks at roughly 50% of washer revenue. Customers pay in increments of 25 to 50 cents per 5 to 7 minutes, and because nobody wants to haul damp laundry home, they almost always extend the dryer cycle. That last 5 minutes of dryer time costs you almost nothing in additional gas and earns you 50 cents. It adds up. The key performance metric in this business is something called turns per day. It is exactly what it sounds like. How many complete wash cycles does each machine run in a single day? The industry average is around 3 turns per day. High-performing stores in dense urban markets hit 4 to 6 turns. Stores in weaker locations sometimes fall below 2. In a 40-washer store, losing just 1 full turn per day across the entire floor costs you approximately $5,400 per month in gross revenue, or $64,800 a year. That is an enormous difference, and it comes entirely from one variable: how often your machines are running, weekends are busy. Almost every laundromat owner will tell you that. Friday evening through Sunday is where the bulk of volume concentrates. The economics problem is that machines sitting idle on Tuesday morning are still costing you rent, still costing you insurance, still costing you the slow burn of depreciation. So smart operators use off-peak pricing, $1 off the wash cycle on Tuesday and Wednesday mornings, for example, to smooth traffic throughout the week and increase total weekly machine turns without reducing the weekend rates. Now add another layer. The industry calls it the wash, dry, and fold service, or WDF. Instead of customers doing the work themselves, your employees do it for them. Drop the laundry off in the morning, pick it up clean, and fold it in the afternoon or evening. The service is priced per pound, typically between $1.50 and $2.50 per pound, sometimes more in higher income areas. The margins on this service are higher than on self-service because you are selling convenience to people whose time is worth something to them. Industry survey data shows that 51% of laundromats already offer drop-off WDF services, and 18% have added pickup and delivery. The stores that have added it well report it becoming their fastest-growing revenue stream. And then there are commercial accounts. Hotels, gyms, restaurant groups, Airbnb management companies, medical offices, massage therapy practices. All of the businesses generate continuous laundry volume, and none of them want to own their own industrial machines. A boutique hotel going through 15 sets of sheets and 40 towels every day cannot justify buying and operating its own commercial laundry. But it needs its linen done fast and done right. Landing 2 or 3 commercial accounts like that changes the economics of a laundromat significantly. They fill your machines during weekday off-peak hours, they pay reliably, and they do not require the retail marketing effort that individual customers do. Vending also matters more than people expect. Industry data shows that 83 to 90% of laundromat customers buy soap from the on-site vending machine. That is an extraordinarily high capture rate for a vending product. Snacks and beverages hit 81 to 82%. Laundry bags, 60 to 65%. These are captive customers with nothing to do for 45 to 90 minutes. They will spend money if you give them the option. If you are enjoying what you're learning here, take a second to subscribe and like the video. It genuinely helps this channel keep going and gets this kind of content in front of more people. Now let's talk about the part of this business that nobody puts in the brochure. The passive income story is not completely wrong. It is just incomplete in ways that matter enormously. A laundromat can run without you physically being there every hour. That is true. But without you physically being there is very different from without anyone doing anything. Machines break and display error codes that regular customers cannot fix. Coin acceptors jam. Detergent spills create floor hazards that become liability issues. Garbage fills up. Bathrooms, if you have them, need to be cleaned. People occasionally try to break into coin vaults. The dryer exhaust ducts fill with lint over time and become a fire hazard if not regularly cleaned out. Stores that run completely unattended face higher rates of vandalism, faster equipment degradation from unreported mechanical faults, more customer complaints, and negative reviews online that drive potential customers to competitors. The most successful operators run what the industry calls a semi-absentee model. They invest in remote surveillance cameras that let them monitor the store from their phone. They hire a part-time attendant for peak hours on weekends. They use digital payment systems that let them check machine usage data and revenue in real time without being physically present. They have a repair technician on call. They show up regularly to inspect, adjust, and manage. But they are not chained to the location. Fully attended stores, with a staff member present during most or all operating hours, run payroll at 15 to 25% of gross revenue. Fully unattended stores run payroll closer to 0 to 5%, using only third-party cleaning crews on a scheduled basis. The margin profile looks better on an unattended store on paper. The absolute dollar profit is often higher on an attended store in practice, because attended stores are cleaner, safer, better maintained, and able to offer the high-margin WDF service that drives serious additional revenue. Now let's talk about coins, because the laundromat industry is in the middle of a technology transition that changes everything about how these businesses operate. Traditional laundromats ran entirely on quarters. You went to the change machine, you got quarters, fed them into the washer. The owner periodically opened the coin vault with a key, scooped out heavy bags of quarters, drove to the bank, counted and deposited the cash. The problems with this model are significant. Coins are heavy and inconvenient for customers. Full coin vaults attract thieves, which is why break-ins at laundromats are a real and documented security concern. The labor involved in coin collection, counting, and depositing is real, and you have zero data about what your machines are doing at what times because a coin drop is just a coin drop. It tells you nothing. Card and mobile payment systems change all of that. Customers load a balance onto a store-branded card or a mobile app, then swipe or tap to start a cycle. The owner can see in real time, from anywhere, which machines are running, how many cycles they have completed, and how much revenue they are generating. Pricing changes, a discount for Tuesday morning, a price increase on the large capacity machines, can be made remotely in minutes instead of requiring physical label changes at every machine. And because customers preload funds into the system, some of that money sits there unspent, which is essentially free working capital for the business. Upgrading from coin to card systems cost $400 per machine on the low end for basic card readers, and $5,000 to $15,000 for a centralized kiosk system. It is not a small investment, but the operators who have done it report lower security losses, better customer retention, and genuinely useful data about their own business that they never had before. Let's talk about what can go wrong, and I do not mean in a theoretical way. I mean in the specific, documented ways that real laundromats fail. The lease is probably the single biggest structural risk in this business, and most people getting into it for the first time do not appreciate why until it's too late. A laundromat is not portable. The plumbing, the electrical infrastructure, the gas lines, the drain mains, all of it is built into the walls and floor of that specific location. If your lease expires and your landlord decides to redevelop the property, raise the rent dramatically, or simply not renew, you cannot pick up your laundromat and move it. The cost to rebuild the same infrastructure in a new location runs between $100,000 and $300,000, sometimes more. And you lose your established customer base entirely because remember, 87 to 90% of your customers live within 1 mile of your current location. They are not following you to a new neighborhood. This is why experienced operators structure their leases with a 10-year base term and 2 5-year renewal options for a total occupancy horizon of 20 years. And they make sure those renewal options are in writing, with defined rent escalation caps, before they spend a dollar on build-out. A lease with less than 5 years remaining and no guaranteed renewal options makes the business essentially worthless to sell, because no buyer will invest in a location they might be forced to abandon. Annuity rate inflation is the second trap. When your water and sewer rates go up by 15%, and municipal utility rate increases in the United States have been running well above general inflation for years, your margins compress immediately. You can respond by raising your VEN prices, but that is not instantaneous. There is always a lag between when your costs go up and when you can raise prices without losing customers to a competitor who hasn't moved yet. And some markets are more price sensitive than others. Demographic shift is slower but just as destructive. If your neighborhood gentrifies, if the older rental housing stock gets torn down and replaced with luxury condominiums whose residents own their own in-unit washers and dryers, your core customer base gradually disappears. This has happened to laundromats in gentrifying urban neighborhoods across the country, and the owners who did not see it coming early enough found themselves with expensive infrastructure serving a customer pool that was shrinking every year. Machine obsolescence happens slowly and then very fast. An operator who defers equipment replacement for too long eventually finds themselves with a floor full of machines that break constantly, require expensive parts that are increasingly hard to source, and deliver an inferior customer experience compared to a competitor down the street who just installed a brand new fleet. Once customers leave for a cleaner, faster, newer store, Getting them back is difficult. Now let's run the actual numbers on what this business looks like when it works and when it doesn't. A well-run mid-sized laundromat. 40 washers and matching dryers in a dense renter neighborhood, with a WDF service, some commercial accounts, and a modern card payment system, can generate gross annual revenue between $300,000 and $500,000. Let's use $400,000 as a working number utilities at 25% of gross. $100,000 a year, rent. This varies enormously by market, but figure between $24,000 and $72,000 annually for a 2,000 to 3,000 square foot retail space. Call it $48,000 in a mid-tier market. Labor, assuming a semi-attended model with part-time weekend staff and cleaning services. $60,000 a year, which is 15% of revenue. Insurance, general liability, commercial property, and business interruption combined, between $2,000 and $5,000 a year. Maintenance and repairs, including the capital reserve, call it $12,000 a year, or $1,000 per month. That puts your total operating expenses at approximately $222,000 against $400,000 in gross revenue. Net operating income, roughly $178,000 a year. On a store you purchased for $350,000, that is a 51% cash-on-cash return. If you borrowed to buy it using an SBA loan, which is the standard financing vehicle in this industry, and which lenders will extend if your store's net operating income is at least 1.2 times your annual debt service, your actual cash return on the equity you put in is even higher. That is the good scenario, and it is a genuine scenario. These numbers are real and they happen. Now here is the bad scenario. Utility rates spike 20% in year 2 because the city raises water and sewer tariffs. Something that has happened in cities like Atlanta, Cleveland, and Phoenix in recent years. Your utility bill goes from $100,000 to $120,000. You have a major machine failure. A main bearing gives out on 3 of your front loaders simultaneously, which happens, and your repair bill for the year is $25,000 instead of $12,000. A new competitor opens 6 blocks away, and your weekly turns per day drop from 3 to 2.4, which is a reduction of roughly $54,000 in annual gross revenue. Your revenue is now $346,000. Operating expenses with the utility spike and repair costs, $243,000. Net operating income, $103,000. Still positive. But compare that to the good year. The gap between a good year and a bad year in this business is $75,000 on a single store. That is the volatility you are absorbing. And if you are carrying debt on the acquisition, which most buyers are, that gap matters even more. Because the debt service is fixed whether your revenue is good or bad. Before you go, make sure to check out the business guide linked in the description and pinned in the first comment. It's packed with practical frameworks that go well beyond what a single video can cover. Here is what the people who run this business successfully actually share in common. They understand that the passive income description is not wrong, it's just an incomplete picture of what semi-passive actually means. They chose their location with the same rigor that a retailer chooses a storefront, because in this business location is not one factor among many, it is the dominant factor. They structured their leases long before they spent money on build-out, because they understood that without lease security they did not actually own a business, they owned a set of machines on borrowed time. They track their machine turns obsessively, not because they love data, but because every fraction of a turn per day translates directly into thousands of dollars of annual revenue. And they treated equipment as a depreciating asset from the first day they owned it, setting aside cash every month so that when the machines needed to be replaced, they were replacing them on a schedule rather than scrambling in a crisis. The laundromat is not glamorous. There is no version of this business that involves Instagram posts about the machines and waiting for the money to appear. But behind those spinning drums is something most businesses cannot offer. A product that literally no one can choose not to need, a customer base that returns every single week, and an economic model that, when built correctly, generates reliable cash flow in good times and in bad. The people who make real money in this business are the ones who went in with both eyes open, understood exactly what they were buying, and managed it like the serious investment it is. If this video gave you a clearer picture of what this business really looks like, please like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. It means a lot. Thanks for watching.